Welcome to the Backs to the Wall podcast. Four mates talking all things football with some special guests and other sporting shenanigans as well. This week on The Wall, Premier League football is just around the corner. We'll be previewing the remainder of the fixtures with football set to get back underway in the English top flight on the 17th of June. We'll also be giving you our greatest all-time Premier League 11. As well as that, our Send Him to the Reserves feature is back, where we each nominate a player who we think has been particularly poor on or off the pitch and vote to send them to the reserves. And lastly, the return of the Lockdown Accumulator this week, giving you our selections in the Bundesliga, La Liga and the Turkish Super League. So lots to get stuck into this week on the Backs to the Wall podcast. So the Premier League has been on hold since the middle of March, obviously due to coronavirus, but each club is yet to play 9 or 10 matches, and we now have a start date. So football will get underway again in the Premier League on June 17. So what are the fixtures we have to look forward to as the Premier League gets back underway?
So on the 17th we have Man City hosting Arsenal and Aston Villa at home to Sheffield United. So a couple of tasty affairs to get the football back underway in England.
I think Liverpool can actually, if Man City lose against Arsenal, Liverpool can win the title at Goodison the following weekend. So it will obviously be quite significant for them. But I think in terms of looking at the Premier League, we discussed it a bit last week. And it's almost, it is a guarantee Liverpool are going to win. But it's kind of like the rest of the table where the interesting things are going to happen. I mean, you've got almost like a 6-7 team race for relegation, but almost like the Champions League places this season. You've got teams like Leicester, Wolves, Sheffield United competing for a Champions League spot, especially now because fifth place is almost opening up for Champions League football due to Man City's impending ban from Champions League competition.
Yeah, I've been so impressed by Wolves and Sheffield United, especially this season, sitting in front of the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal. That's really obviously impressive. And Arsenal are away to Man City, their first game back, so it gives both those teams an opportunity to pull further away from those two London clubs, which is just fantastic when you think about the budget that they'll be on.
Yeah, so Manchester United currently are in that all-important fifth place, but only 2 points ahead of both Wolves and Sheffield United. And Spurs and Arsenal, of course, definitely not out of it either. They're at 41 points and 40 points respectively. So interesting for the Champions League places. And as you mentioned, Andrew, it's equally interesting down at the bottom of the table, where you couldn't really say that any of the teams are certainly relegated yet. Doesn't look good for Norwich City, but only 4 points off Villa in 19th. And there's a whole host of teams on 27 points as well. West Ham, I know one of your favourite managers currently is in charge of West Ham United. Andrew, Watford and Bournemouth also on 27 points. And Brighton, they're not safe either. 29 points, just 2 points outside the drop zone at the minute.
Yeah, well, you kind of mentioned West Ham, that they've probably been one of the biggest underachievers of the season. I mean, they started with Manuel Pellegrini as manager in the summer, and they spent a load of money on players, expecting a half decent year, and they find themselves just out of the relegation zone on goal difference and making the baffling decision to rehire David Moyes. I'm kind of, I wouldn't say concerned for them for their safety, but it could be quite dubious as to whether or not they stay up this season.
Well, I think they've got a good experienced manager in David Moyes. You know, he's
not get there of what I think of David
did a good
Moyes
job
and his managerial ability.
Everton, he was good at Man United. Really impressive at Sunderland as well. Just didn't really have good players around him.
I don't think he had the backing of the fans either. I mean, They should have been stuck right behind him. But
let's not get on to that.
One thing I was looking at was Norwich City, and I was going to make a defence for them and say that they're only 6 points off safety, and I was thinking, well, it's not unthinkable in the 8 or 9 matches which are remaining for them to pull themselves out of the relegation zone. But looking at their their score, the goal scoring record, and their defence, it's not looking too impressive, as they've got the joint worst goal scoring record in the division and the second worst defensive record. Not to mention their running is absolutely horrific. They've got quite a few of the top four. Is it, Andrew? Do you know who they've got?
I'm pretty sure they've got Chelsea, Man U, Arsenal and Man City left to play. So I'm struggling to see Norwich survive. And I mean, they were kind of one of the only teams that didn't spend big this summer. They kind of stuck to a relatively small transfer budget. I mean, to be fair, Aston Villa are just a place above them, but did they not spend something like 100 million in the summer?
I mean, they've got the likes of Jack Grealish and John McGinn. It's weird to see them so low down the table because they've been performing exceptionally well this season.
Kind of the relegation story's been really weird this season. Is teams like Southampton and Watford looked down and out earlier on in the year, but both kind of went on a half decent run. I mean, Southampton are, 7 points adrift now, but when they got the 9-0 drubbing off Leicester, you were thinking they were in trouble. I mean, they stick by their manager. I think they've given him a long contract now because they kind of think that he is going to work well for them. He was quite highly rated when he was at RB Leipzig, and they kind of seem almost out of it now. And also Watford, they were down and out. I mean, they were horrific at the start of the year, but just before lockdown, they beat Liverpool 3-0. And that's Liverpool's first loss and was almost really damaging to their title if we hadn't have played this season. But I think for all these teams that are on like the 27, 29 mark, where there's only a couple of points in it, the season coming back now, it's almost like a new season, like form's out of the window. It's totally anyone's game with so little games left. It's really up to them. If you perform the first few games of the season, you've got a big chance of staying up.
Yeah, it is so hard to predict down at the bottom. I think we probably would all say, if we had to give you an answer, Norwich will go down. Aston Villa have a game in hand, actually, so they're only on 25 points. But if they win their game in hand, and that is the first day back, they are at home to Sheffield United, so tricky enough game. But if they win that, that's them up to 28 points out of the relegation zone. And in terms of the other sides, who do you reckon is going to join Norwich City and go down? I know you say, Andrew, you'd love to see West Ham go down.
To be fair, I mean, West Ham have been pretty bad recently, but it is really hard to pick. I mean, you've got Bournemouth, who in the past few seasons have been quite good, but the football they kind of play this kind of open passing game, and they usually score a lot of goals. But this season, the goals haven't been coming, and since they've conceded loads, this is where they find themselves now. So it's kind of been a weird one for them, as it's kind of the first season they've properly struggled. And if they continue playing the way they were before this season was postponed, then I think they could be in trouble because they were shipping in goals left, right and centre. But like I said before, it really is anyone's game. If you step up to the mark early on, you've got a big chance of staying up. I mean, the other teams, I think you look at Newcastle, they probably have just enough points as long as they can win a few games. I mean, Everton are 10 points away. Yeah, I think you're looking at Southampton, Brighton, West Ham, Watford, Bournemouth, Villa. They're going to be the ones in the scrap.
So obviously the tail of the season has been Liverpool, and really I think all the other sides have just been disappointing this year. Liverpool have really been the only standout performer, and I don't know how many points clear, 25 points or something like that. So aside from Liverpool, what other sides have stood out for you? I
mean, I think you have to credit Leicester City for where they are on the table. I mean, they're pushing Man City right to the wire for second place at the minute. And again, if you're going off things like budgets and players available to them, it's really, really impressive. And they're about 5 points, I think, ahead of Chelsea at the moment as well. So they were on a pretty poor vein of form before the lockdown. So it'll be interesting to see how they come out of the blocks, and if they kick on and push on for that second place and try and pip Man City there, or if they'll maybe continue their form. But as Andrew said before, form's really out the window. Everyone's getting a fresh start, and it's going to be interesting to see who pulls through and who's came back, who's got the freshest legs. It's going to be really interesting.
One thing is kind of looking at injuries where teams didn't have players available. I mean, you look at Tottenham, they've now got Harry Kane back, whereas if we continued the season prior to it being postponed, he would have been out for the remainder of the season. I mean, that's huge for them. You don't know what that could do. That could put them right in contention for that fifth spot. Another kind of weird one, I mean, you look at the season, it has kind of been a disappointed one for the so-called big teams, but Chelsea have kind of like turned around a lot of people's perception of them. They've kind of went from being quite a disliked team to people turning thinking, I actually don't mind them. I mean, I've kind of found myself doing that because they've got a lot of young players now with that transfer ban, and it's kind of hard to dislike Frank Lampard as a manager. unless you're a West Ham fan. But I've quite enjoyed watching them this season. It's kind of refreshing seeing one of the bigger teams using their young players, as people like Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount wouldn't be getting this opportunity if they didn't have the transfer ban.
It is really impressive to see those young players able to sort of take the opportunity that's been given to them due to this transfer ban and really take it and run with it. Like, he's also got the young Scottish boy Billy Gilmore as well. He's been getting a few appearances before the break in play, and they've been carrying it well. And they're above, when you look at Man United, Tottenham, Arsenal, they're above all them, and they're not really too far off Leicester, so they can definitely hold their heads up high. And it just shows you that money doesn't have to always be everything. I'm sure Frank Lampard would love to maybe beef out his squad a wee bit with some what you'd say like more experienced, high quality signings, but those young boys are really doing well at the minute.
Well, I think they've just recently agreed to sign Timo Werner from RB Leipzig, and they're in talks for a few more players. So maybe in the summer they could bolster their ranks quite a lot. I think another team to look at as well is Sheffield United. I mean, they've been so good this season for a team that has largely played with them in the Championship, and even some players still in League One. I mean, for my team, Sunderland, being in League One, they're kind of the model club to follow as to what you want to do. I mean, a lot of these players have battled it out in the lower leagues, and now, they're 7th in the league. It's really impressive.
So we're all very excited to have the Premier League back on the 17th, not too far away now, and I suppose that leads us on nicely to the next piece we're going to talk about. We are going to pick our greatest all-time Premier League 11. We've all decided just to keep things simple and go 4-4-2. I suppose we'll just get stuck in then. So who have you both gone for as your goalkeeper?
So my goalkeeper, I've went for Peter Schmeichel. For me, there wasn't really, he was the only option for me. 300 plus games in the Premier League, and many players have easily said he's the best keeper they've faced.
Yeah, it might sound a bit repetitive with a few of these positions, but for me, Peter Schmeichel, he's got such a fantastic CV when you look at it. He's also when he also won the Euros with Denmark, and he got voted world's best goalkeeper 92, 93. I think there's nobody else really. The only person that I was sort of thinking of was Van der Sar. And also a fellow Man United player, but I think he was just a fantastic all-round goalkeeper. His distribution was great shot stopper. So Peter Schmeichel for me. Yeah,
3 votes for Peter Schmeichel, as you say. I think he kind of picks himself. He's one of the players that, when you ask anyone their all-time 11 in the Premier League, Peter Schmeichel's usually the first name on the list.
So we can start off with my nomination for right back, and I've gone for Alan Hutton. I've gone for Gary Neville for that position. Sort of one that I didn't have too much trouble deciding the right back. I know you got people like Pablo Zabaleta. He's probably my second choice in there, but I think just with how many titles he won with Man United, and 2 Champions League victories, and another person who boasts a fantastic career. Over 400 appearances. I just couldn't really pick anybody else for that position.
Yeah, I've also got Gary Neville for mine. Like Jamie said, you can't really argue with the titles that he's won. I think maybe in 10 years' time we probably could be saying Trent Alexander-Arnold for that position, but for at the minute, Gary Neville has to be there for me.
Yep, nice and easy. Again, 3 votes for Gary Neville. 8 Premier League titles, over 400 Premier League appearances. There weren't really too many other players I could think of that, as my right back. Who have you both gone for your centre backs?
So my 2 centre halves are John Terry and Vincent Kompany. I think for me, John Terry, you can't look past his influence in that Chelsea team, and kind of the longevity that he had in the Premier League. I think over 19 years he played at the back for Chelsea, 40 plus goals as well for a centre-half, 5 league titles. I nearly didn't pick him for the ridiculous guard of honour Sunderland gave him in his last game for Chelsea, but I think Terry has to be in that team for me. Another one, Kompany, this is kind of a debate between him and Rio Ferdinand, but I think he was kind of a pivotal figure in Man City developing into this title-winning team that we see in the Premier League now, and his command and presence was just immense in that City defence. Again, I think I mentioned with Trent Alexander-Arnold will probably be saying the same thing about Virgil van Dijk in a few years' time, but for me, it's Terry and company.
So for my couple of centre backs, I had a real issue, and I was left scratching my head for a lot of this afternoon, trying to think of which two I was going to pick. I mean, as you said, Andrew, Rio Ferdinand, he was one that was sticking out in my head for a while. I even considered putting Virgil van Dijk in, just because he's been so fantastic over the last couple of years. But my first one here, I've also gone for Vincent Kompany. And although Man City have had millions to play with over the last few years, and he came right at the start of that, I just think he's been fantastic. He's been at the heart of everything great that they've done since, what was it, 2009 that he arrived. And he's been great, won 4 Premier League titles, a couple of FA Cups, and he may not boast the same CV as some of the other centre-halves on my list, but I just think of him as Mr. Man City, and he's had a few injuries as well, and he's battled through them. Perhaps curtailed his playing career a wee bit, but I have a lot of respect for Vincent Kompany, and I loved watching him play. He'd pop up with a few good goals as well. So yeah, he's my first centre back, and the second one that I have is actually it's Nemanja Vidic. I went for Vidic because I really like a no nonsense sort of physical centre half, and I just thought the Vidic just screams that. And he really was the heart of the Manchester United defence for a number of years. And he also boasts 5 Premier League titles. And my notes have sort of got that he's just so strong and physical. And I suppose supporting Partick Thistle, it's a bit like your sort of heart's in your mouth with your centre backs all the time with what they're going to do. But when I used to watch Man United on TV, Vidic was always so strong, and he would always you wouldn't feel too uncomfortable when you knew he was at the back defending you.
Yeah, so like Andrew, I've picked John Terry as well. He went straight onto the team sheet for me. He was the rock at the heart of Chelsea's defence for a long time, and he led Chelsea to successive Premier League titles between 2004 and 2006. So John Terry went straight on for me. It was a little bit more tricky for the second one. I actually really liked Nemanja Vidic as well. But for me, Rio Ferdinand just edged it. He was quick. He was athletic. He won, 6 titles with Man United since he joined in 2002. And I think Terry and Ferdinand would have been some partnership. John Terry has 2 votes then. Kompany has 2 votes. So they will be our 2 centre halves. So far, Schmeichel, Gary Neville, Kompany, and Terry. Who have you gone for your left back?
So again, left back for me wasn't that hard of a choice. I went for Ashley Cole. I think just because he's probably been one of the best left backs we've had in the Premier League for a long period. I mean, he was part of the Invincibles with Arsenal, and then he was such a key player in that Chelsea team as well. When you look at his play, he was kind of like the complete fullback. He was good attacking and good defending. So I think he was the only choice for me. I
think I've gone a little bit controversial here as well. I didn't want to make it too readable for the listeners, and I went for Patrice Evra. I just really like his attitude to football. He puts up a lot of videos on social media that are just hilarious, and how much he loves the game. But obviously not only that, he's got 5 Premier League titles, and I used to just love watching him, and he's part of that really strong Manchester United defence, and he got in the sort of the Premier League Team of the Year 3 times, and he was in the FIFA World 11, I think, back in the 2009 or 10. So yeah, I think I didn't really like Ashley Cole very much, and maybe that's what's swaying my opinion here, because he is a great footballer, Ashley Cole. But yes, Patrice Evra for me.
What he did to Cheryl Cole was unforgivable.
Yeah, well, he's my reserve player, so that's what I'm going to go for.
Yeah, it is a shame not to have Patrice Evra on this starting 11, because, as Jamie said, he did have such a fantastic career with Man United. But I, like Andrew, just couldn't really look past Ashley Cole, part of that Invincible side. Won a couple of titles at Arsenal and also at Chelsea. And he's one of the players who goes straight on my team sheet. So moving into the midfield then, remember we are going 4-4-2 here. We'll start, I guess, with our 2 central midfielders. Andrew, who did you have?
So I think this was probably the hardest one for me to pick, as there's been so many great central midfielders, and I was trying to think of a good balance between the pair. So I went for Paul Scholes and Frank Lampard. For me, Paul Scholes has probably been one of the best technically gifted players we've seen in the Premier League. I know countless players have said that he's one of the best players of his generation. Again, he was part of that amazing Man United side. He won 11 titles. He's part of the 100 club, and he could just pick a pass from anywhere. And then I thought that Lampard would work well with him, with Lampard being the more goal-scoring midfield. I think he's got something ridiculous, like 170 Premier League goals. And yeah, Lampard was just such a good player for Chelsea throughout his career, like scoring goals from everywhere. Just a great player.
So yeah, I've like Andrew for one of my centre midfielders. I've gone for Paul Scholes as well. I just loved watching Scholes. His passing ability was like nothing you'll almost ever see. I mean, I've got a couple of quotes here, like from Zinedine Zidane, one of the best players of the game, and he said that his favourite player, just out of everybody he'd ever shared the pitch with, is Paul Scholes. Ronaldinho says that he would love to be able to pass like Paul Scholes, and even Lionel Messi, he says that the Barcelona academy, Paul Scholes' name is always mentioned, so they use him as sort of he's sort of put on a pedestal, and they sort of see him as sort of like the teacher, and sort of an inspiration for them to really like to kick on. He also popped up with a nice goal now and again, but I think just an all round really nice guy as well, and he definitely gets my first pick for central midfield. My other one, I kind of went for Andrew's logic here as well. I didn't go for Lampard. I just thought of somebody who might complement Scholes quite well is David Silva, and that's just because I love players that have a bit more flair to them, and David Silva just screams that. He pops up with really nice goals, not every week, but he's always in and around the goals, and he's really got that creative flair about him. And I know he's played now and again in a more attacking role, a centre attacking midfield or out in the wings occasionally, but he's played enough in central midfield, I think, to make a good case for him to be put there. I mean, he's got a couple of league titles as well, and also got a World Cup win, of course, in 2010, and also you got the Spanish Euros. Euro winning team in 2008 and 12. So I think David Silva, just because I love to watch him so much, he's my second central midfielder.
Yeah, so that's 3 votes for Paul Scholes then. He was straight onto my list, and like Jimmy was saying there, unbelievable at passing the ball and popped up with the odd goal. I always remember the goal he scored against Barcelona, 2008 Champions League semi-final. I think afterwards he admitted that he actually sliced it, but I'll never forget that goal. And he was just incredible to watch. Probably one of the most technically brilliant players you'll ever see in the Premier League. Alongside Paul Scholes, I've also gone Frank Lampard. This is a toss-up for me, because Steven Gerrard is equally a brilliant player. But for me, you think of Lampard. What has he scored? 177 goals in the Premier League, from midfield. That's pretty absurd, and over 100 assists as well. So Frank Lampard's stats kind of speak for themselves, I think, and he was a game changer. Yeah, so 2 votes then for Scholes and Lampard, so they will form our 2 centre midfielders. Who have we gone for out on the right?
So for me, this was another one that was fairly easy. I've gone for Cristiano Ronaldo. I don't think it needs much explanation, this one. We didn't really see the best of him, or the best of what he could get to whilst he was in the Premier League, is when he went to Real Madrid. Like, his goal scoring record was something stupid. Like, he scored over 300 goals in less than 300 games, I think. You could tell when he was in the Premier League, he was just way above the standard. So he gets my pick. Yeah,
for my right midfielder, I've also gone for Cristiano Ronaldo. I just think someone who's going to be remembered as one of the greatest, or the greatest player in the history of football. You can't really overlook that. And I know he played his best football at Real Madrid, but at Man United he was also fantastic to watch. Just his quick feet and his ability to beat a man put an unbelievable cross in. Not to mention his finishing ability. I mean, what sticks out for me is always that free kick from about 35, 40 yards for Man United against Portsmouth. So yeah, it's Cristiano Ronaldo for me.
Yeah, there's 3 votes for Ronaldo. He was quite good, wasn't he? Also, one of the greatest pieces of transfer business. Man United signed him from Sporting Lisbon. He was 18 then for 12 million, and then sold him 6 years later for what was a world record fee of 80 million. He could play anywhere, really, across the midfield. He could play up front. 84 goals in 190 odd games. Well, his goal scoring record, as Andre said, is just daft now. At Real Madrid, he scored over 400 goals. He's won Champions League a few times, lifted the Ballon d'Or a few times. So yeah, Ronaldo, I think, picks himself. Over on the left then, could be a little bit more interesting. Andrew, who did you go for?
So I've kind of stuck with a Man United theme here for the winger. I've got Ryan Giggs as kind of, when you think of great wingers of the Premier League, I think Giggs is one of the ones that comes to mind straight away. He was one of the only players to score in every Premier League season up until the point where he retired. And yeah, when he was in his prime, he was unbelievable with his pace. He could score a goal, assist, and he won 13 titles whilst he was at Man United. So for me, I think he was the only choice.
Yeah, it's going to be Ryan Giggs for me over on the left as well. I mean, 13 Premier League titles is just fantastic, and over 670 league appearances. He's one of my favourite players I've ever seen play in the Premier League. He was just he seemed so humble on the football pitch, and he just was a wizard with the ball at his feet. Loved to get up and down the line, and he probably would also get into an 11 for having the hairiest chest. If you remember his famous goal against Arsenal back in 1999, he had a fantastic run up the left, marked with a nice finish into the top left corner, and he takes his top off and runs around the pitch, and he certainly hasn't experienced Veet anyway.
Yeah, I've also picked Ryan Giggs, and yeah, it picks himself really. You've both mentioned all the reasons why he was so good, and he was good up until the end of his career as well, which is the scary thing at whatever age he was. He was playing central midfield there, in his later years, and he was still top class. So Giggs goes in for me.
I think it's also important to mention that he does have an OBE for his services to football as well, which is just brilliant. And it just shows how important he was to the game in England.
And a knighthood for being a good brother.
That's why I said earlier about him. He was so humble on the football pitch, because off it he hasn't been the best.
Up front then, I suppose this one could be quite interesting, because there are so many players that you could put in here, and undoubtedly it won't feel right to leave a lot of these players out. But who did you go for, Andre, up front?
Well, like Michael said, you'd feel bad for leaving players out. I mean, I was thinking all day of ways I could put Kevin Phillips and Jermaine Defoe in this team, but I really can't. I'm going to be unbiased to a point that I also can't add Alan Shearer to it. But anyway, I'll get on with it. So first I've got Thierry Andre. I think this kind of speaks for itself. He's one of the most cultured players we've ever seen in the Premier League. He kind of changed the standard when he joined. I mean, he was this big, powerful striker that had the pace, could finish anything. I mean, he scored over 170 goals for Arsenal, was part of that invincible team. Yeah, he was just so good. I would say probably the only downfall you look at, he wasn't able to win Arsenal more titles. But of course, his last goal that he did score in the Premier League was against Sunderland. So that was a nice one to remember. So to partner Henry, I've got Sergio Aguero. He actually just recently overtook Henry to be the highest scoring foreign player in the Premier League. And again, when you think of modern era Premier League players, Aguero is top of the list for being one of the best players there. You know, I've seen him a few times play at Sunderland, and he's just so good for being a small player. He's so powerful and quick just to turn and get that shot away. And he's also got the claim of probably scoring one of the most memorable goals in Premier League history with that last-minute winner against QPR to get Man City the title. another reason why I picked both these players is they actually have the best goals to game ratio against any other striker in the league. I think Aguero actually tops that list. So yeah, for me, I think these two probably one of my favourite players that haven't played for Sunderland in the Premier League, and they have to be in it for me.
So the first striker that I've gone for, just like Andrew, Thierry Andre, he's a nailed on candidate. I remember reading before that he came to the Premier League as a failed winger, and Arsene Wenger at Arsenal just got the absolute best out of him, and he just took the Premier League by storm and just couldn't stop scoring. He had such a physical presence. He was good with both feet, and he was good in the air. Although he only won a couple of Premier League titles, I like to mention also that he won a World Cup and the Euros with France, and he's also the top goal scorer in English football for 4 seasons in a row, which is a great feat in itself. And I remember when he came back for his second spell, although he didn't play too many times when he came back on loan to Arsenal. I just remember getting such a buzz hearing about the transfer and him coming back. And Andrew won't like this, but I didn't know you then, but I was up celebrating his goal when he did score against Sunderland that day, because it's just such a nice to see someone who's so good come back after being away for a few years and add to his goal tally. But he really was a fantastic striker. His partner up front, I've gone for Marouane Chamakh. I just think I'm joking. So I've gone for Alan Shearer against Andrew's best wishes. I think you cannot leave out the top goal scorer in English football, scoring 260 goals. He has to be in there, and I know he didn't have the best goals to game ratio as Thierry Henry or Aguero had, but I think he has to be in there. Such a deadly finisher, and he did it for his whole career. Started off, was it Southampton? He was at, and then won the title with Blackburn before moving to Newcastle and scoring so many goals. And he just did it right up until the end. Such a great professional, and no one's came too close to him yet. So I just think that speaks for itself. A great striker, and yet that's my pairing up front: Henry and Alan Shearer.
Again, similarly to Andrew, I've also picked Thierry Andre. He was the first name that I thought of whenever I thought of all-time strikers in the Premier League. Had it all. Was quick, unbelievably skillful on the ball, and was a great finisher as well. So he goes in again. Also, like Andrew, I've picked Sergio Aguero. I think
you picked all the same players.
Nearly. I think with maybe one or two difference. I think Aguero is arguably, he's definitely one of the best imports to the Premier League ever. And I don't necessarily think Aguero gets the praise he deserves. I mean, he's just taken over Henry, hasn't he? And okay, he may not catch Alan Shearer. I mean, that's, 260 goals or something? It's quite unlikely that he will, but it's very likely that he's going to pass both Wayne Rooney and probably Andy Cole as well. So I just think Aguero slightly underrated by certain people when they kind of just think that he just scores goals. But I mean, he's been so important to that Man City side over the last, the guts of nearly 10 years. And of course, he's possibly scored the most memorable goal that I think I will see in my lifetime in that 2012 season. You were at the
Sunderland Man United
game, yeah.
So that was pretty crazy to experience from our part, as we had no idea what was going on. And I think Man United fans to this day still have a dislike for Sunderland fans celebrating when it was announced that Man City scored in the last minute. But it's worth noting I haven't actually paid Michael to pick Aguero and not Alan Shearer, so there you have it.
So lastly then, who are we putting in the dugout? Who is our all-time greatest Premier League manager? And I personally don't see how there's really any debate here. But Andrew, who have you gone for?
I couldn't agree more. There wasn't another name that I could think of putting. For me, it's Sam Allardyce, the best manager I've ever seen.
Are you sticking with that?
No. the best manager I've seen at Sunderland. But anyway, yeah, for me, Alex Ferguson has to be there. There isn't any other manager that's come close to him, or probably will come close to him in the Premier League game. In 13 Premier League titles, 38 trophies in total. It's just insane, his record.
Yeah, for me, it's Alex Ferguson without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, when you look, he came from managing East Stirling to St Mirren, Aberdeen, to Man United, and the career that he had there was just unbelievable. And I don't think it'll ever be matched. And I think everybody looks up to him as being the best manager. I mean, there's no one that really comes close. So it's Alex Ferguson for me.
Yep, nothing really else I think needs to be said. Sir Alex Ferguson will be our team's manager. I was very tempted to go for David Moyes, but Alex Ferguson just got in front of him. So I suppose before we go on to our honourable mentions, we'll just run through the team then. So in nets is Peter Schmeichel, our two fullbacks, Ashley Cole, Gary Neville, and the centre halves, John Terry, Vincent Kompany. Midfield then, we have gone for Scholes and Lampard in the middle, Ronaldo out right and Giggs on the left, and up front Thierry Andre and Sergio Aguero.
You two did put the exact same for every position.
We did not. We had one different defender, central defender.
Who did Michael have?
Vidic.
I had Ferdinand. Ferdinand.
Oh, Ferdinand. It would do some damage to that team.
Yeah, it would be quite good. I suppose just to finish this bit off, we could maybe talk about some of the players, because there's a few players that I absolutely hated leaving out. Were there any, maybe if we each just give a couple?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, you look in that central midfield, again, there's so many. I think Gerrard pops up to mind. I mean, he could have easily got in ahead of Lampard. I mean, they're often touted as being the same player, which is why things at England didn't work, it's the common joke that they couldn't work together. But yeah, Steven Gerrard was such a good player for Liverpool.
I think for me, I think of great strikers in the Premier League. Didier Drogba always comes to mind, and I kind of wanted to put him in, but I couldn't squeeze him in ahead of Henry and Shearer. I was also thinking of Petr Cech. I mean, he's had such a fantastic career, both with mainly with Chelsea, but also had a good spell in goals for Arsenal. And as I said before, if it hadn't been for how good Schmeichel was, then he would have been definitely up in the running. You've also got the likes of like Michael Owen and like Robbie Fowler and people like that who are great players, and you could definitely make up a fantastic other 11 which would rival this one. But these are definitely this 11 here is a fantastic one.
Yeah, a couple of names that came to my mind is, of again, like Jamie said, you could probably make another team out of these, but Didier Drogba was one that I hate that I can't have him in, because I think when he was in his prime, he was the best centre forward in the league. I also would say Wayne Rooney as well has to get an honourable mention, not just for the goals he scored, but like he could play. He could play in the middle of the park as well. And who else to have down here? Steven Gerrard, just because he was the ultimate kind of one-club man, and that Champions League comeback in Istanbul is unforgettable.
He wasn't technically a one-club man.
Well, why?
He had a stint at LA Galaxy.
Well, I mean, yes, when you say Steven Gerrard, nobody thinks of LA Galaxy.
But I think it's also, I'll just chip in because another couple just flashed into my head here. With the likes of Roy Keane, centre midfield, I think it's really difficult not to put him in. And you've also gone back a little bit further. You've got sort of Martin Keown was a great centre half for
his
Arsenal.
son was a terrific footballer as well, still is.
Niall Keown, he had a spell on loan and then Partick Thistle, and then we signed him, but he's definitely not the player his father was. Let's put it politely. But yeah, those two as well, and even like Yaya Toure in the centre midfield. I just loved watching him run up and down. Patrick Vieira as well. But as I say, there's only 11 places on this team. I wish there was more, but they definitely make the bench anyway.
Titus Bramble as well.
Oh, Titus Bramble is an icon representing Titus the Titan. But for me, I think it's hard to look past Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira as they're kind of like iconic figures of the Premier League. But when you're kind of picking a best team, they kind of get looked past because they're not this flair type of player. But they were both so good, and just the battles that them two had just together were ridiculous. Just classic hard men, just doing these crunching tackles. It's just stuff you live for.
Yeah, I wouldn't fancy taking on either of them in a scrap. Okay, so we will move on then, and my favourite feature in the podcast, it's the send him to the reserves. Let's remind ourselves who all is on the bench. Who went last week?
It was Chris Uwalumo last week for his miss from what the commentators say was about 2 yards. Easier to score than to miss.
So I haven't had a player in the reserves yet. Hopefully this week. So we did say last week, if any of you listening would like to send in your nominations for a player you'd like to see go to the reserves, then please do. And one of our listeners did get involved. So we're going to hear from Ben O'Reilly now and hear who he would like to send to the reserves.
My name's Ben O'Reilly. I'm a Partick Thistle supporter, and the player that I want to send to the reserves this week is Alfredo Morelos. The reason being is that I'm not a Celtic supporter, I'm not a Rangers supporter, but realistically they're the big games in the Scottish Premiership, and they're the ones that you want to win. And with those big games, that's when the big players come to light. This is when the pressure's on, and that's when you need your players to step up. And realistically, it doesn't matter if they score 15, 20 goals throughout the season. These are the games that you want to win. They're the pressure games. And, Alfredo Morelos has just never delivered on the big stage. He might be a cracking player outside of it, but, who really cares if he scores 3 goals against, Hearts or, Livingston in Tony Macaroni Stadium? No one really cares about that. It's all about the big stage, and he's never ever delivered. He's played against Celtic 12 times. He's won 3 times, drawn once, and lost 8. In that, as a striker, as Rangers' top striker, in that he's got 5 yellow cards, 1 double yellow where he got ended up in a red, and 1 straight red, and in that he's got no goals and no assists. And to me, that's just the signs of a bang average player, someone who can't step up to the mark, someone who you want someone there who will be able to put when pressure's put on for them to deliver. Again, no one cares if you score 3 goals in Tony Macaroni Stadium, can't deliver on the big stage. You're not a first team player, you're not a player that is going to should be at a big club like Rangers. They need someone to deliver. And saying that, I also just hate the person as well. He's just such an arsehole. Whenever he plays against people, he agitates the crowd. And I just think he's an awful person. But that's who I want to send to the reserves this week. Just think he's just never delivered on the big stage. He's one of the worst performers when it comes to the Old Firm games, and they're the ones that count, and he just has not delivered.
Yep, thanks for that, Ben. It is really good to hear from the listeners of players who they can't stand, and we would encourage you, please send in any nominations that you have.
He made a good case, to be fair. It was quite funny hearing the passion in his voice there.
Who would like to get us started here at the Backs to the Wall HQ?
Well, this week I've decided to go for Ashley Cole, and perhaps this is the reason why I decided to put Patrice Evra in front of him in my all-time Premier League 11. He's got a pretty bad record with being involved with run-ins with the law. I'm sure there was in the papers years ago, I remember reading that he ended up shooting someone in the face with an air rifle, which it's just outrageous. And I could not believe reading that someone who's such a prominent figure could do something so stupid. He claimed that he didn't realise that it was loaded, but who points a gun at someone's face, no matter what gun it is, and pulls the trigger? There was no proper damage done, but that was only the first reason. He also cheated numerous times on his wife. I think he was first accused of adultery 3 times, but then vigorously denied it. But then fresh claims came to light, and he ended up the two ended up getting a divorce. But he was also clocked doing 104 miles an hour in a 50 zone, which again is just inexcusable, and another reason why he's definitely going towards my reserve. But my last and final point, and it was Jens Lehmann who shares my disgust in this, that Ashley Cole wrote an autobiography at age 25, and I just think that's absolutely outrageous. So yeah, Ashley Cole gets sent to the reserves, or he's my shout for the reserves this week.
He's not liked in the Northeast for ruining the heart of Northeast sweetheart Cheryl Cole. So I think I'll jump in next. I'm going to go kind of one a bit from the news this week, and kind of when the segment first started, we were kind of aiming to do things that players had done over the week if they'd done something stupid or said something stupid. So my nomination is Charlton striker Lyle Taylor for his reasons behind not playing for the rest of the season. Jamie actually mentioned him in the last podcast for him not playing and that, and you're kind of thinking, fair enough, he must just be scared of the virus affecting his family and that, which is a good reason. And if he'd said that, no one would have really questioned it because it's a fair point. However, the day after I think we recorded the podcast, he came out and did an interview with Sky explaining he didn't want to play in case he got injured, and so he couldn't get a decent contract elsewhere as his contract's up with Charlton this season, so he must be looking to move. Charlton are currently third bottom, and Taylor's one of their key players. I think he scored 11 goals this season, and he's really just deserting his teammates and the fans in the time that they need them most, and as they're going to be without one of their best players, purely because the harsh reality, you can look at saying that he's being greedy. I mean, he's evidently made the decision to leave early already, and he's just protecting himself. He even said that he knew it wouldn't sit well with people. He made the point in saying that he's 30 and won't get another chance at a decent club if he gets injured. But he wouldn't be in that position now if Charlton didn't give him that chance to play in the Championship and when he was scoring the goals in League One. For me, he has to go to the reserves, as this is where kind of the greed factor comes in for football. The clubs and money have got in his head, and you could make a point that he's technically breaching his contract and refusing to work, and no doubt he'll still be getting paid whilst he's letting the fans down, his teammates down, and I really can't imagine it sitting well with Charlton fans. So I think for me, Lyle has to go at the reserves. He also rejected a contract from Sunderland last season as well, so that's one reason.
And actually, just you mentioning Sunderland here brings me on nicely to my nomination this week, and it's a former Sunderland captain, Lee Cattermole. Now, any player with the reputation of being a hatchet man is never going to be extremely popular, but Lee Cattermole is actually officially the dirtiest player in Premier League history. Research compiled by websites called Dirty Players show that he has 270 odd Premier League appearances. He's 88 yellow cards and 5 red cards, which actually in terms of cards per game has Lee Cattermole as the dirtiest player in Premier League history. He's actually joined by a few other Sunderland players who also make that list. Andrew, you can probably tell me a bit more about these, but Elhaj Diouf, Gavin McCann and Andy Cole are among the other Sunderland players who come in the top 50 dirtiest Premier League players. He's also closely followed in that list in second place by Joey Barton. So these are the type of players making up the dirtiest players list, and Lee Cattermole, for me, goes to the reserves this week just for some of the awful tackles he put in over his career. Nearly ended Luka Modric's career, in fact. Yeah, Andre, I don't know if you've anything to say about Lee Cattermole.
Well, for me, Lee Cattermole can't go anywhere near this, as he's a player that's very close to my heart. I think he's just one of those players that if he's on your team, you love him. You love someone that gives 110%. And in his defence, he did get better towards the latter stages of his career. I'm pretty sure his last red card was 2013, maybe. I'm pretty sure that was against Hull, his last red card. It was in that season anyway. So he did kind of control himself. I'm led to believe he was a bit of a hothead in his youth. I'm pretty sure he was on pub watch for a bit. Him and Nicholas Benter as well were pictured running over the top of cars in Newcastle. But he's I think a lot of Sunderland fans hold Lee Barry Cattermole in high regard. So I couldn't dare comment on him to be put to the reserves.
Yeah, I'm nominating Lee Cattermole, who is apparently the dirtiest player in Premier League history.
See, this is really difficult for me and where my vote's going to go, because I don't want to vote for myself, because I did that last week with Chris Wildermo, because I couldn't not. But I struggled to vote for Lyle Taylor because, and again, to bring up Partick Thistle, he had a couple of quite successful loan spells at Thistle, and I really loved him as a player. He was quite a bit younger back then, but it was about 6 years ago that he had this loan spell.
If he did that to you, though, at Thistle, would you still have that hold him in such a high regard?
Well, no, of course I wouldn't. But it's so hard, because I mean, football integrity is getting called into question with what he's doing. It's really isn't fair. It's quite disgusting, to be honest. The fact that he's holding out for a move which he thinks would be better elsewhere, and he's not really fulfilling his contract.
It's not as if you'll be on peanuts at Charlton as well.
But I think I'm going to have to side my vote this week with our listener, Ben O'Reilly, because I don't particularly like Alfredo Morelos. I think he's a good finisher, really deadly on his day, and seen him score quite a few goals at Partick Thistle's expense, and also numerous times at other venues across Scottish football. But he's quite a hothead, and he's got a horrendous disciplinary record in Scotland. And also, as Ben said there, he's never scored in an Old Firm game. He's missed penalties. He's missed absolute sitters, almost open goals. And it seems to have got into his head, and he just cannot seem to score against Celtic. Isn't it double figures now, the amount of games that he's played against them? They're the city rivals in the Old Firm, and so I think my vote this week goes for Alfredo Morelos. Yeah,
it's a bit of a difficult one for me this week, who I'm going to vote for. I'm going to stay noble and not vote for myself, despite growing a dislike to Lyle Taylor for what he's done. I think since Ashley Cole's made our best ever Premier League team, I couldn't vote for him, and Lee Cattermole shouldn't have even got nominated as far as I'm concerned. So for me, Morelos is my vote for the reserves.
Yeah, well, even though my Lee Cattermole case was utterly compelling, I won't be voting for myself. What Lyle Taylor has done is unforgivable. But like Andrew says, I don't think I could nominate Ashley Cole, even though writing an autobiography at 25 is downright unacceptable. However, he's in our greatest ever Premier League 11, so that leaves me with Alfredo Morelos, and I'm going to side with Ben O'Reilly this week. The fact he's never scored in an Old Firm is something that really bothers me, and he's got a really poor disciplinary record, like Lee Cattermole. So that is 3 votes for Alfredo Morelos, who joins an illustrious list of players on the Backs to the Wall reserve bench. Lastly then, we will move on to Lockdown Accumulator, mixing things up this week. Very exciting. La Liga is back, so we'll be heading over to Spain. And bizarrely, the Turkish Super League. So we will stay in Germany for the Bundesliga, and we've added La Liga in Spain and the Super Liga in Turkey. Who have we picked this week? Did anyone win big last week? I certainly didn't.
No, I think I'm on minus 20.
Yes, same for me. I had a win, a loss, and a draw. I think that's a couple of weeks now that's happened. So yeah, I'm absolutely having a nightmare. So this week I've decided to go for Wolfsburg in the German Bundesliga. They're at home to Freiburg, and I fancied them to get the home win. Moving over to the Spanish La Liga, I've gone for Leganés to beat Real Valladolid at home. And then heading down to Turkey, I've gone for Istanbul Başakşehir to beat Alanyaspor at home. Don't really know too much about either of these teams, so I was a bit of a shot in the dark, but £5 gets me a tasty £37.95 back.
Yeah, so this week I've gone for Union Berlin to win away in the Bundesliga. I have Villarreal to win in La Liga and Besiktas to win at home in the Turkish League, and £5 gets you £72.19.
Very nice. For myself, I have opted for Hertha Berlin to beat Frankfurt in the Bundesliga. They're 11-10 at home. Espanyol to beat Deportivo Alaves, 23-20, and in Turkey it is Yeni Malatyaspor to beat Kasımpaşa SK, and the fiver treble returns pretty tasty 47-41. So that just about wraps things up this week on the Backs to the Wall podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening this week. Please do remember, if you're watching on YouTube, to like, subscribe, leave a review, and to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We will be back next week with another episode. Please do get in touch with us on Facebook or Twitter, also on Instagram as well, Backs to the Wall Pod. So do get involved. Send us your Lockdown Accumulator if you've been having a bet on the football as it begins to come back. And as well, remember, just like Ben did this week, nominate a player who you'd like to send to the reserves, and we'll play your clip on the show next week. So thanks for listening.
Rooney goal was enough for the 3 points. Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero!